What's up, guys? It's Ken, also known as Yacht from Life Reset Abroad. One of the questions that I've been getting quite frequently is whether or not in 2026 should people consider actually living in Portugal. Now, I've been here a little over 2 years, and I will have to say my short answer would be no. No, you shouldn't. And I'll explain why. First and foremost, I have to say things have changed a lot in just 2 years here in Portugal. A lot in 2 years. The major thing I would say is that the price alone here in Portugal has risen tremendously. I mean, I want to say a house that I was tracking over actually 5 years, because it's been 5 years, almost 5 years since I considered actually moving to Portugal. I had an opportunity back in 2021. My job was supposed to allow me to work remotely from Portugal. At the last minute, they backed out. So unfortunately, we didn't move in 2021, but we had started making plans, i.e. getting on all of the Facebook forums and Facebook groups and etc., trying to figure out where we should live, doing research, looking at housing, schools, getting on waiting lists, that whole thing. So I've been tracking this thing for quite some time. And to say that the prices have skyrocketed over 5 years. From rent to buying a house, it has been incredible. A house that was 400,000 euros now sells for easily 800,000. A house that we could have bought in 2023 for 700,000 is now worth 1.1. So that's a big deal when it comes to housing. Rent in itself, at least here in Lagos, has doubled as well. A house that you could have rented for 1,500 now probably rents for close to 3 grand. House that was a little over 1,300 3 years ago, easily rents for over 2,000 now. So you have a lot of issues when it comes to housing. So another reason is just the cost of living. The cost of living here 3 years ago was reasonable, even by American standards. 5 years ago, it was spectacular. i.e. you could, buy a pasta donata and a coffee for a little under €1. You could go to dinner for two for under 20 euros. That included drinks and entrees and full meals. Now we easily spend 60 bucks, 60 euros for a meal. Things have gotten tremendously expensive, where it's too expensive to eat out. The other day we ordered hamburgers for a family of 4. It was over 100 euros. So those are the things that to think about, is that it's not as the cheap place, inexpensive place where you have this great quality of life. That doesn't exist anymore. And so when people are trying to make their dollars stretch and to, get a really good quality of life, cheap location, or a relatively inexpensive location, Portugal isn't that anymore. It has become one of the most expensive places in Europe to live, especially when it comes to housing. It's actually cheaper to go live in France or Spain when it comes to housing. So you have a bunch of other options. Now, the next thing that I actually talk about is the political climate and how things are changing from citizenship/residency issue. First and foremost, the government here has decided to change the residency law or citizenship law from 5 years to 10 years. Why is it a big deal? Because people moved here under the pretenses that, hey, if I do everything I'm supposed to do, get all my documents in order, moved here, become a model citizen or model resident, in 5 years, it will qualify me to be a citizen of Portugal. I invest all my time and money, pay taxes to be here just like everyone else, and I am afforded by our agreement the opportunity to be a citizen. Well, the government decided to change that. They said, nope, we're going to change that citizenship requirement from 5 years to 10 years. We're going to double it. And what this actually did was kind of break the rule of law. In essence, someone came here up under the pretenses, and now you're moving the goalposts. And so now, legally, they're in a bit of a limbo. And a lot of Portuguese lawyers have said that this new law actually violates the Constitution, which current form it does, because, like I mentioned, the people who came here up under that law, it's no longer valid. And so you can't move the goalposts. Now, for people who come in after the law has been enacted, say that they decide they want to make the law enact in January of 2027 and make it official, and that's when it starts, then those people can come in up under that new law, and they will have been afforded notice that the law has changed, and they will have to meet that set of circumstance. Unfortunately, the law currently does not provide for that one grace period. It applies retroactively. So the people who are currently up under the 5-year rule, they now have to apply for the 10-year rule, and etc. So it's a big issue. Me, myself, I have no foot in the game, because I didn't come here under the pretenses of applying to the Portuguese citizenship. I'm married to a French woman, and therefore I will be applying for French citizenship, hopefully in the next year or so. So it does not affect me, but I know plenty of people who it does affect. And unfortunately, even though a lot of the political pundits and lawyers here in Portugal say that it's unconstitutional, the government has 2/3 control, basically enough votes to be able to change the Constitution, which is a big deal. And then therefore, everyone that were under the circumstances of, hey, I'm going to be able to get this 5-year law, 5-year citizenship, then it'd be null and void. So that's one of the big deals about this whole citizenship change. And what people are saying, especially on Reddit and forums and etc., are, hey, Portugal is a third world country. They don't follow their own laws, the rule of law, their own constitution, all because of political right-wing parties that want to push out all the immigrants and etc. It may or may not be true, but that's what's going on. And so for people who are actually considering this and considering move to Portugal, it is an issue, a real big issue. Another consideration is the taxes. So there was the beginning of a tax regime called the NHR, which basically afforded you quite a bit of tax advantages, which a lot of us took advantage of, including myself, which is one of the reasons why we ended up picking Portugal. Basically, there was a foreign income exclusion, which basically if you made income abroad, they would exclude it from being taxed here in Portugal, which is a really big deal. It makes sure you talk to a Portuguese tax accountant if you are, considering what to do about your tax situation here in Portugal. Make sure you get that advice. But what I will say is that they remove these tax incentives, and so now you will be taxed up to a progressive rate of 40% of your income, which is quite steep, especially compared to the US and other countries. And so now that has gone away. The Golden Visa program, which is if you bought a house, roughly 500,000 euros, it would afford you a residency, which you only had to spend minimal amount of time here in Portugal, I think 7 days a year or something like that. And after 5 years, it will qualify you for citizenship. That program has gone away. They have tried to introduce other programs for younger adults and families, 35 and younger, but there are some caveats with that too. Basically, it affords you a 0% interest, I believe, on mortgages, but you have to make under a certain amount annually. It may be 85,000 euros or something like that, combined annual income from both of the parents if you're married, and etc. So that has quite a bit of limitations as well. Basically, they're trying to get a bunch of young people here into Portugal to kind of help repopulate the aging population. And that's one of the other issues, is that a lot of the young people don't see value in staying here. The wages are very low. The government hasn't done anything to increase the wages. And so with that, you have a lot of people that are graduating. They bail. They get out of here. They go to France. They go to Germany. They go to Spain. They go to UK. They go to all these other countries to make a living and to start families. And so you have this population, this very educated population that bails and move abroad. And I think that's one of the other considerations that the government doesn't think about is, well, especially with the changes to the citizenship law and etc., is, well, if we're doing this to the immigrants that are coming here, how would we feel if they did it to Portuguese citizens abroad, i.e. in the US, i.e. in the UK, i.e. in France, if our citizens were treated that way? And I think they don't really think that through, you know? I think last time I read, there were roughly about 4 million Portuguese that were living abroad. And that's not even including the generational Portuguese, i.e. the grandparents moved to France and now they are technically, after generations, French, because they weren't born in France, they weren't born in Portugal, they were born in France. And so now you have this issue of all these generational Portuguese living in other countries, and it's a big deal. And they don't consider how it would affect their own citizens in Portuguese descent if they were treated like they're treating the immigrants here. But you are starting to have this huge sentiment of anti-immigrant policies and anti-immigrant rhetoric. And I know that at least one American, especially popular YouTuber, has been attacked. I haven't been attacked, luckily, knock on wood, because I'm very respectful. I don't go out and drink and all that stuff. But to say the least, it is something that you have to consider, is that you're starting to see more and more anti-immigrant rhetoric. And but you're starting to see it all over the place, not just Portugal. You see it in the US, you see it in France, you see it in Spain, Italy. You're starting to see it everywhere. So it's not just Portugal as a microcosm. It is globally. It's a global issue, especially in the West. The next thing I will talk about is actually the schools here, especially if you have a family. Unfortunately, the teachers here and etc., they make very little money. So what we've seen, a lot of expats have been complaining about, especially bullying in school, being able to talk to the administrators, and they basically pretend like they don't care, which is, of course, very concerning if you have young kids. And it seems that the bullying happens more so with immigrant kids. So, Brazilians, it's a real bad issue where the Brazilian children are being bullied by Portuguese children, etc. You have other issues such as other immigrants, such as Americans, etc., being bullied in school. And so you have this huge issue, and the administrators don't seem to want to do anything about it, which is a big deal. So when you decide to uproot your life, bring your family to a better place, and you have this issue of bullying, it becomes an issue. It definitely becomes an issue. So that's another consideration. Those are the reasons why I say don't come into Portugal. Now here are the two exceptions. One, you just absolutely love the Portuguese culture and you love the landscape, like behind me, because I'm at Porto de Mos, which is a beach here in Lagos, and you just love the natural beauty, love to go hiking, you love the people, you love the culture, which 99.9% of my interactions here since I've been in Portugal and visited during my exploration trip have been wonderful. The Portuguese people have been so welcoming, especially here in the Algarve and up there in Cal de Serena. They didn't speak a lick of English and I didn't speak a lick of Portuguese, but we made it work. And they were so helpful. And even old ladies trying to help me with my bags and groceries and whatnot. So it was a wonderful experience. It is a wonderful experience, and the people are very nice in general. So that's the first reason that you should still consider Portugal if you actually love the Portuguese culture and people. The second, I would say, is sometimes when you are a person of color, a black person from America, when you're constantly dealing with the potential of being shot, thrown in jail, constant racism, lethal racism, you look at the alternatives. You look at Spain, you look at France, you look at Thailand, you look at all these other places, and you think, okay, where can I have a country and I'm still treated quite well? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who look like me consider when they are considering between all these countries and Portugal. And a lot of us are choosing Portugal. There are a lot of stories of people and their bad experiences, particularly in Spain, because they're having a real big issue with racism, even against some of their best football players in their major leagues. So you're starting to have this real big issue of people talking about how bad racism is and etc. So that's something you have to consider. You know, even though this place is not as inexpensive as, say, France or Spain, you still have the option to go ahead and come here. So I think those are two of the exceptions. Otherwise, if you are one of the fair-skinned people on the planet, the lighter shade of brown, don't come here. You have better options. Go to Spain. If you're a retiree, go to France, which I can kind of dig into that analysis a little bit deeper if you like. You will have a better quality of life. The cost is actually cheaper overall, and you will have a better experience for the remainder of your life. I think, just my opinion. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on why you should not come to Portugal in 2026. And if it was my choice and I had to move here in 2026, I probably would still make the same choice, but I can see why people wouldn't. All right, I thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this whole anti-immigrant policy? What are your thoughts on actually moving to Portugal in 2026? I want to see what you guys think. All right, see you guys in the next one. Peace.